Hey friends, it's good to see you. There are really four big themes that we've got to tackle this year in the state of Kansas. And to be honest, I think this is probably the most audacious and important set of things that we've had to do in a very long time. We need jobs, and we need to continue on that. The second theme is we need a smaller government that's closer to the people, that is more democratic, that's more responsive to people. The third issue is we've got to deal with the budget. And then the last one is we really need to mind our P's and Q's, and that is in education. And the state's most important responsibility is how it runs and funds its state K-12 and higher education. 4 years ago, we had one of the highest per capita state employees to population in the United States, in the top 5, if not the top 10. And so we're slowly moving that back. So one of the initiatives that the governor has supported is moving elections. And that is moving what are elections that are normally in February in the early spring, and moving those to when there are more people that are voting. And the rationale for the governor's perspective on this is pretty simple. It's that in the spring elections, very few people vote in them. It's 10% or on a very low order, versus in a fall election that more people will show up and they can participate in their government a little bit better. Now, in the short run, we've got some budget issues. And the governor and I talked about those during the election, despite what you read in the certain newspapers. You know, we said there is a budget deficit. We're going to deal with that. Now, one of the things that they're trying to tell you is that the deficit exists because of big cuts in the income tax. The reality is this, is that we are now collecting more in taxes now than we were last year. Let me repeat that. We're collecting more in taxes now than we were last year. The tax cuts have actually not cut our tremendously into that. One of the other things that has happened, though, is in the last couple of years, we have increased spending on K-12 education, and we're now spending about $250 million. Let me repeat that, $250 million more than we were just a couple of years ago. So when you look at where the deficit is, probably more than half of it is because of increased expenditures to K-12, not to cuts to K-12, increases to K-12. And so we need to be cognizant, of that. Now, do we need to work on our budget some more? Absolutely. And so we're looking, very strongly at that. The estimates that were there, we've had some shortfalls in those estimates, but they're only running maybe 1 or 2% in those estimates. Those are pretty doggone good estimates overall. But what we're trying to do is do this. Let's freeze higher education where it is. It had a big cut a couple of years ago. Freeze higher education where it is. And we'll do that for the next couple of years. The next thing is this year, or this past year, we increased K-12 funding over $130 million. There's some more funding according to the formula that should also go in there. What the governor said is let's freeze K-12 education at its higher numbers there and freeze them over the next 2 years. And then let's refigure out what we need to do with the education formula and the school finance formula. The big deal, though, is we got to get more money into the classroom, and we got to target it on kids. The last thing on school finance, though, is you got to remember, state of Kansas, we're putting more and more money in for students, and in most school districts, they're receiving over $13,000 per student of all funds, federal funds, state funds, etc., local funds. And we got to give control to parents. And we got to have an equitable formula that makes sense for the 21st century. Since the governor and I have come in, we now have 59,000 new private sector jobs in the state of Kansas. And that number is the highest number of private sector jobs that we've ever had in the state of Kansas. In that, now our unemployment rate is in the low 5s, high 4s, kind of depending on the month. And if you go and you look out in western Kansas, and there are dozens of counties that have unemployment rates in the 2s and 3s. And so we've got to grow jobs. We've got to grow jobs across the state.